The laugh lasted less than 2 seconds. It almost destroyed 7 years of my marriage. I remember the exact moment because I was standing barefoot in our kitchen at 9:47 on a Thursday night, waiting for a kettle that had already started to whistle. Rain tapped softly against the windows of our brownstone in Brooklyn, and the house smelled faintly like chamomile tea and the vanilla candle I always lit when Damien traveled. My husband called me every night when he was away. It was one of those small rituals that survived even after 7 years together. No matter where he was, no matter how busy he claimed to be, he always called before bed. That night was no different. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his voice warm through the speaker. "Sorry I'm late." I smiled automatically. Just hearing him always made me feel calmer. "Long meeting?" I asked. "You have no idea." I could hear muffled voices in the background. A door opening. Footsteps. The familiar sounds of another business trip. "Chicago treating you okay?" I asked. Cold. Too many people in suits. Not enough decent coffee. I laughed. "You say that every time, because it's true." For a few minutes we talked about ordinary things. The neighbor's dog that kept digging holes under our fence. The elementary school fundraiser I was helping organize. Whether we should finally repaint the guest bedroom. Normal conversations. Married conversations. The kind that make you believe life is stable. Safe. Predictable. Then he sighed. "I should get back in there." "Okay. I'll be home tomorrow night. Drive safe. Always." There was a brief pause. The kind that usually comes right before someone hangs up. "Love you, Claire." "Love you too." I lowered the phone from my ear. Or at least I thought I did. Because the call never disconnected. The screen remained lit. The timer kept moving. At first I didn't notice. I was pouring hot water into my mug when I heard another voice. A woman. Soft. Distant. Laughing. I froze. The kettle hissed behind me. Steam drifted through the kitchen. But all I could hear was that laugh. Light. Familiar somehow. Comfortable. Not the laugh of a stranger speaking to a businessman in a hotel lobby. The laugh of someone who belonged in the room. My stomach tightened. Maybe it was nothing. A coworker. A receptionist. Someone passing by. I told myself that immediately. But then I heard Damien laugh too. Not his polite public laugh. Not the one he used at charity events or corporate dinners. This one was different. Relaxed. Genuine. Intimate in a way I hadn't heard in months. My fingers tightened around the mug. "You should tell her," the woman said. The words came through faintly but clearly enough. Silence followed. Then another laugh. Softer this time. My heartbeat began to pound in my ears. "Tell her what?" I glanced at the screen. The call timer was still running. 22 minutes. 23. Damien hadn't realized I was still there. I should have hung up. Any reasonable person would have. Instead, I stood perfectly still, listening, waiting, searching for context that would explain everything away. Another voice entered the conversation. Male. Unfamiliar. Paper shuffled somewhere in the background. A chair scraped against the floor. Then the woman spoke again. She still doesn't know. The mug nearly slipped from my hand. This time nobody answered immediately. The silence stretched long enough to make my chest hurt. Finally, Damien exhaled. A tired sound. Heavy. Older than the man I knew. "No," he said quietly. "And she can never find out." The world seemed to stop. The rain disappeared. The whistle of the kettle disappeared. Even my breathing disappeared. There was only that sentence. 7 simple words. And before I could process them, before I could convince myself I had misunderstood, the woman laughed again. Not cruelly. Not mockingly. Almost sadly. Then she said something that would keep me awake for the next 30 nights. "Damien," she whispered, "you're running out of time. I did not sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling while rain traced slow paths across the bedroom windows. Every few minutes, I looked at the empty side of the bed where Damien usually slept. By 3 in the morning, I had replayed the conversation so many times that every word felt carved into my memory. She still does not know, and she can never find out. The next morning, I expected anger. Instead, I felt something worse: doubt. Doubt is quiet. It does not crash through your life all at once. It slips into ordinary moments and poisons them one by one. By 7 o'clock, I was standing in front of my classroom greeting second graders with the same smile I always wore. The children ran inside carrying backpacks almost as large as they were. They laughed. They talked about cartoons and soccer practice and weekend birthday parties. I nodded and smiled and pretended everything was normal. But every time my phone buzzed in my pocket, my stomach tightened. At noon, Damien sent a text. "Landing tomorrow at 6. Miss you already." A red heart appeared at the end. 7 years ago, that message would have made me smile. Now I stared at it for almost a full minute. Then I typed back, "Miss you too." The lie came easier than I expected. That frightened me. The following afternoon, I drove to JFK Airport to pick him up. The terminal buzzed with travelers dragging suitcases across polished floors. Families reunited near baggage claim. Businessmen rushed toward waiting cars. I stood near the arrivals area watching the sliding doors open and close. Then the atmosphere shifted. It was subtle, almost impossible to explain. People did not stop moving. They simply moved differently. A path opened through the crowd without anyone being asked. Nobody announced his arrival. Nobody told people to step aside. They simply did. Damien emerged from the terminal surrounded by 3 men. One walked slightly ahead. Another stayed several feet behind. The third carried a tablet and spoke quietly into an earpiece. Damien remained calm, hands in his coat pockets, moving with the confidence of someone completely accustomed to being watched. My chest tightened. I'd seen this before. Charity galas, political fundraisers, expensive restaurants. The strange gravity that seemed to follow him everywhere. 2 airport security officers nodded respectfully as he passed. A man in a tailored suit lowered his voice the moment Damien approached. Nobody treated him like an ordinary businessman. They never had. When Damien finally saw me, his expression softened immediately. The wall between him and the rest of the world disappeared. He crossed the distance and wrapped his arms around me. "God, I missed you," he said. I hugged him back automatically. For a moment, I almost forgot everything. Then I noticed something unfamiliar. A different cologne. Cedarwood instead of the one he normally wore. A small detail. Yet lately, every detail seemed important. One of the men behind him discreetly stepped away to give us privacy. Another collected Damien's luggage before I could offer. "Ready?" Damien asked. I nodded. As we walked toward the parking garage, I noticed people watching him. Not with curiosity, with recognition, respect, sometimes even fear. The feeling followed us all the way to the car. During the drive home, Damien talked about Chicago. Long meetings, delayed flights, hotel food. I listened carefully, too carefully. Every sentence felt like a test. Every detail felt rehearsed. The weather was terrible, he said. Freezing rain the entire trip. I glanced toward him. Really? Yeah. Miserable. I looked back at the road. Earlier that morning I had checked Chicago's forecast. Clear skies. Mild temperatures. Maybe forecasts were wrong. Maybe conditions changed. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. Yet another crack appeared. Small. Quiet. Impossible to ignore. When we arrived home, the black SUV that had followed us from the airport remained parked half a block away. I noticed it through the kitchen window while Damien unpacked upstairs. The vehicle sat there for 20 minutes before finally driving off. Watching. Waiting. Protecting. Or perhaps something else entirely. For the first time, a thought entered my mind that I had spent years refusing to examine. Maybe the most dangerous thing about Damien was not the secret he was hiding. Maybe it was how powerful he had become while hiding it. I did not touch the phone. Not that night. Not even after Damien carried it upstairs and placed it on his nightstand. I told myself I was better than that. That if 7 years of marriage meant anything, I would not become someone who searched through passwords and private messages. But trust was no longer protecting me. Trust was the reason I had missed the signs in the first place. The next morning I woke before sunrise. Damien was still asleep beside me, one arm stretched across the empty space where I had been lying. For a moment, he looked exactly like the man I fell in love with. Peaceful, safe, familiar. Then my eyes drifted toward the phone charging on the nightstand, and the feeling disappeared. By 8 o'clock, I was standing in my classroom arranging art supplies for the day. Construction paper, markers, glue sticks. Ordinary things, yet my mind was somewhere else entirely. During lunch break, I sat alone in the faculty lounge staring at my phone. Finally, I opened a search engine and typed something I never imagined I would search. Chicago Business Conference October attendance records. Hundreds of results appeared. Most were useless. I almost gave up. Then I found an article from a local business journal. The conference Damien claimed to attend had published photos from the event. My pulse quickened. I clicked through dozens of images. Men in suits. Speakers. Sponsors. Damien was not in a single one. That did not prove anything. Maybe he attended private meetings. Maybe he skipped the public events. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. But another crack appeared. Bigger this time. 2 days later, Damien left for work before I did. The moment his car disappeared down the street, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table. The house felt unusually quiet. Even the refrigerator seemed louder than normal. I logged into our shared travel rewards account. We both used it for flights, vacations, weekend trips. I knew the password because we had created it together years ago. The account opened immediately. I found the recent trip. Departure from New York. Return 3 days later. But the destination was not Chicago. I stared at the screen for several seconds before reading it again. Boston. Massachusetts. Not Illinois. Not Chicago. Boston. My chest tightened. Maybe it was a connecting flight. Maybe there was another reservation. I searched every detail. There was only one destination. Boston. Why would he lie about that? Before closing the browser, something else caught my attention. A linked executive travel account connected to one of Damien's holding companies. I had never looked at it before. Curiosity overcame hesitation. What I found left me staring at the screen in disbelief. There was not one company. There were dozens. Real estate groups. Shipping firms. Investment partnerships. Technology holdings. Their names stretched across multiple pages. Some I recognized. Most I did not. The deeper I looked, the stranger it became. 3 assistants managed different sections of Damien's calendar. Separate teams coordinated meetings, travel, and security logistics. Nobody seemed to tell Damien where to go. They waited for his instructions. Expense reports revealed things I had never noticed before. 4 separate security firms appeared throughout the records. Private drivers. Protective details. Advanced teams. Entire categories of spending that ordinary executives never needed. My stomach tightened. I'd always known Damien was wealthy. Everyone knew that. But wealth was not the same thing as influence. This felt different. Bigger. Like looking at the hidden foundation beneath a skyscraper. Then I found his travel schedule. Boston appeared repeatedly over the last 3 years. Not monthly. Not weekly. Just often enough to matter. Every trip lasted less than 24 hours. Every trip was marked private. No meetings listed. No clients listed. No explanation listed. Only approval signatures from people whose names I had never heard before. I sat back in my chair. For the first time, I realized how little of Damien's world I actually understood. We shared a home. A marriage. A life. Yet there were entire teams of people managing pieces of his existence that I had never even seen. By evening, I still had no answers. Only more questions. Damien came home carrying takeout from my favorite Italian restaurant. He kissed my forehead. Asked about my day. Complimented the flowers I had placed in the dining room. Everything seemed normal. Too normal. While we ate dinner, I studied him carefully, looking for guilt, looking for deception. Instead, he looked tired. Not guilty. Not nervous. Just exhausted. Around 9 o'clock his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. For the briefest moment, something changed in his expression. Not fear. Not panic. Sadness. Then he locked the screen and slipped the phone into his pocket. "Everything okay?" I asked. The question sounded casual. My heartbeat was not. He forced a smile. "Just work." Another lie. I knew it instantly. Because for the first time in 7 years, Damien could not quite meet my eyes. The next week changed something inside me. Not because I discovered a shocking truth. Not because I caught Damien in another lie. It changed because I started paying attention. Really paying attention. Once doubt enters a marriage, it turns ordinary moments into evidence. Every glance matters. Every silence feels intentional. Every unanswered question grows teeth. On Tuesday afternoon, I left school early after a faculty workshop ended ahead of schedule. The sky over Brooklyn was bright and clear, the kind of crisp fall afternoon that made people linger outside coffee shops with paper cups warming their hands. I was halfway home when I remembered I had forgotten my lesson planner. Annoyed, I turned around and headed back toward school. That was when I saw Damien's vehicle. At first, I thought nothing of it. His office was nearly 30 minutes away. Maybe he was meeting a client nearby. Maybe he was grabbing lunch. Then I noticed where the convoy was parked. Across the street from a small brick building I had never paid attention to before. It looked ordinary. 2 stories. White trim. A narrow front garden decorated with colorful pinwheels. Children were running across a fenced playground. I slowed my car and read the sign near the entrance. Maple Grove Children's Center. A school. My pulse quickened. Damien sat inside the back seat of a black SUV with tinted windows. Another black SUV waited 50 feet behind it. A man wearing an earpiece stood near the sidewalk pretending to check his phone while quietly watching everything around him. Damien never seemed alone. Even from a distance, his presence changed the atmosphere. Parents walked past without recognizing him, but the adults who did notice him quickly looked away. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I stayed parked half a block away, feeling ridiculous and ashamed and unable to leave. Finally, the front doors opened. A group of children poured outside laughing and talking. Parents waited near the sidewalk. Nannies gathered backpacks. Damien leaned forward slightly, his attention fixed on the crowd. Then I saw it, a little girl. Maybe 8 years old, blonde hair tied into a loose ponytail. A purple jacket 1 size too big. She ran down the front steps carrying a bright blue backpack covered in cartoon stars. Damien smiled. The expression hit me harder than any lie, because I recognized it immediately. It was the smile he used when he looked at children. The smile he used with our nieces and nephews, gentle, unprotected, real. The little girl spotted him. Her face lit up. She waved enthusiastically. My breath caught. Damien lifted his hand and waved back. Not like a stranger, not like someone making a polite gesture, like someone she knew, someone she trusted. I expected him to get out of the SUV. He did not. I expected the girl to run toward him. She did not. Instead, a woman approached her from the sidewalk and took her hand. The girl said something. Then she pointed toward Damien's vehicle. The woman followed her gaze. For a brief second, Damien and the woman looked directly at each other across the street. Neither moved. Neither smiled. Yet something passed between them. Something old, familiar. The woman guided the child away. Damien remained where he was. One of the men near the sidewalk spoke quietly into his earpiece. Another opened the rear passenger door. Damien stepped out briefly and handed over a large gift bag decorated with colorful ribbons. The security guard delivered it to the woman without a word. The little girl immediately hugged it against her chest. Then Damien returned to the SUV. No conversation. No photographs. No attention. The convoy waited another minute before pulling away from the curb. I sat frozen behind the steering wheel. Questions crashed through my mind faster than I could answer them. Who was the little girl? Why did she know him? Why was a man powerful enough to travel with security details hiding across the street from a school? Most importantly, why had he hidden this from me? That night, Damien arrived home carrying groceries and talking about dinner plans for the weekend. I watched him unpack vegetables onto the kitchen counter as though nothing had happened, as though he had not spent part of his afternoon watching a child he had never mentioned. Then his phone vibrated. He glanced down. For the first time, I managed to read the notification before the screen went dark. My heart stopped. The message contained only 4 words. She asked about you. The message haunted me for 3 days. She asked about you. 4 simple words. 4 words that followed me through lesson plans, grocery shopping, and sleepless nights. I tried to convince myself there had to be an innocent explanation. Maybe Damien sponsored a school. Maybe he donated money anonymously. Maybe the little girl belonged to a family friend. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. The real problem was not the child. It was the secrecy. Secrets create shadows, and shadows make ordinary things look frightening. On Friday afternoon, the final school bell rang and my students rushed toward the parking lot. I stayed behind grading spelling tests until the building emptied. Around 5 o'clock, I finally packed my bag and headed home. Traffic moved slowly through Brooklyn. The sky had already begun turning orange behind the buildings. When I pulled into our driveway, Damien's car was gone. That was unusual. He had promised we would spend the evening together. I walked inside and found a note on the kitchen counter. Emergency meeting. Back later. Love you. The handwriting was his. The explanation felt familiar, too familiar. I stood there staring at the note until my phone buzzed. It was my sister, Megan. She wanted to know if I could help her choose paint colors for her new apartment. Normally, I would have gone immediately. Instead, I heard myself making an excuse. 30 minutes later, I found myself parked half a block away from Maple Grove Children's Center. The school was closed. The playground sat empty beneath the fading evening light. I felt ridiculous. Embarrassing even. Yet, I could not leave. I sat there watching the building as darkness settled across the neighborhood. Then, just after 6:30, a light appeared inside one of the second-floor windows. My heart skipped. Someone was there. 5 minutes later, a familiar black sedan turned onto the street. Damien's a sedan. He parked behind the building and stepped out. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. He was not wearing a suit. He was dressed casually in jeans and a navy sweater. Somehow that made everything feel more personal, more real. I watched him walk toward a side entrance. The door opened before he even knocked. Someone had been expecting him. The door closed behind him. I checked the dashboard clock. 6:38. 10 minutes passed. 20. 40. I should have left. I knew that. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was. At 7:22, the side door opened again. Damien emerged carrying something under his arm. A large pink poster board covered with glitter and stickers. My confusion deepened. He looked down at it and smiled. Not the careful smile he wore at business dinners. The genuine one. The same smile I had seen when the little girl waved at him. Then another figure appeared in the doorway. The woman from the sidewalk. The woman who had taken the girl's hand. She stepped outside holding a cardboard box. They exchanged a few words I could not hear. Then she laughed softly. My stomach dropped. It was the laugh. The exact laugh from the phone call. I knew it instantly. The sound that had started everything. I felt cold despite the heater running inside the car. The woman said something else. Damien lowered his eyes for a moment. The expression on his face was not romantic. It was not flirtatious. If anything, it looked sad. Almost guilty. Then she reached into the box and handed him a folded piece of paper. Damien stared at it for several seconds before slipping it into his pocket. The woman hesitated. Finally, she asked a question. Even from across the street, I could read her lips clearly enough to understand. Have you told Claire yet? Damien's shoulders stiffened. He did not answer immediately. Then he slowly shook his head. Something inside me broke when I saw him shake his head. Not because I finally had proof he was hiding something. I already knew that. It was because I saw the weight of it. Whatever secret Damien carried, it was not making him happy. It was exhausting him. I followed his car home from a distance that night. Neither of us spoke much during dinner. He seemed distracted. I seemed normal. At least I hoped I did. Around midnight, after he fell asleep, I sat alone in the living room staring at the dark windows. The city lights reflected back at me like questions with no answers. Eventually, I grabbed my laptop and opened it again. This time I searched for Maple Grove Children's Center, staff directory, volunteer programs, fundraising events, anything. Most of it was ordinary. Teachers, administrators, community announcements. Then I found an old newsletter from 2 years earlier. I almost missed it. Buried halfway down the page was a photograph from a charity renovation project. My heart began pounding immediately. Damien stood in the picture, younger, smiling. Beside him stood the same woman from the school entrance. Her arm rested lightly on the shoulder of the little girl. Underneath the photo was a caption: Community Partnership Day. Special thanks to Damien Moretti and Emily Harper for supporting local families. Emily Harper. Finally, I had a name. I stared at it for several seconds. Emily. The woman from the call. The woman from the school. The woman who knew my husband well enough to ask whether he had told me the truth. The next morning I searched again. Emily Harper. Hundreds of results appeared. Most belonged to different people. Then I found a local newspaper article from 8 years earlier. The photograph made my breath catch. It was her. Younger. Smiling at a charity event. The article described her as a youth counselor working with disadvantaged children throughout New York and Massachusetts. Massachusetts. Boston. The word hit me instantly. Damien's secret trip. Boston. Emily. My stomach tightened. I continued reading. The article was old. Very old. Yet one sentence near the bottom caught my attention. Emily Harper survived a serious medical crisis several years ago and later dedicated her life to helping vulnerable children. I reread the sentence twice. Something about it felt important, even though I could not explain why. By Sunday afternoon, my thoughts had become impossible to control. Every answer created 2 new questions. Why Boston? Why the child? Why Emily? Most importantly, why keep all of it from me? Late that evening, Damien announced he needed to step out for an hour. Work issue, he said. I nodded. The lie barely seemed to bother him anymore. 20 minutes after he left, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Instead, I answered. For a moment, neither side spoke. Then a woman's voice filled the silence. Soft, careful, familiar. Claire, my pulse exploded. I already knew who it was. Who is this? I asked even though I knew the answer. A long pause followed. My name is Emily. Hearing her say it out loud felt strangely unreal. Like a ghost stepping into daylight, I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. How did you get my number? Another pause, longer this time. That is not important. Her voice sounded tired. Not threatening, not hostile, just tired. Then what is? I asked. I heard her inhale slowly. When she spoke again, her voice trembled slightly. I called because Damien never will. My heart hammered against my ribs. Rain began tapping softly against the windows outside. Somewhere in the distance, a siren echoed through the city. Emily's next words changed everything. Claire, she whispered, the little girl you saw is not Damien's daughter. For several seconds, I could not speak. The refrigerator hummed quietly behind me. Rain tapped against the kitchen windows. Somewhere down the street, a car door slammed. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. What? I finally whispered. Emily exhaled slowly. She is not Damien's daughter. I gripped the counter harder. My knuckles turned white. Then who is she? Silence stretched across the line. Not uncomfortable silence. Careful silence. The kind people use when they are deciding how much truth another person can handle. Her name is Lily, Emily said softly. She has known Damien for most of her life. That does not answer my question. My voice sounded sharper than I intended. Emily did not react. I know. Another pause. Claire, I never wanted you to find out this way. The sentence sent a chill through me, because it sounded less like an excuse and more like regret. Then tell me the truth. I heard movement on the other end. A chair scraping across a floor. Then Emily spoke again. 8 years ago, before you and Damien met, I worked at a community center in Boston. I closed my eyes. Boston again. Everything seemed to lead back there. One winter, a little girl was brought to us. She had no family willing to take custody. No stable home. Nobody who could stay. Her voice grew quieter. Most people saw a difficult situation. Damien saw a child. My heartbeat slowed slightly. Confusion replacing fear. What are you saying? I am saying that he helped. Another silence. He paid for tutoring, medical appointments, school supplies, summer programs, everything. I frowned. None of this sounded like the secret I had imagined. None of it explained the lies. Why would he hide that from me? Emily laughed softly. Not the laugh that haunted me. This one sounded sad. Because that is not the whole story. My stomach tightened again. Outside, rain continued sliding down the glass. Then tell me the whole story. Emily hesitated. Lily's mother was one of my closest friends. The room suddenly felt smaller. Was. Another pause. She passed away 3 years ago. I lowered myself into a chair. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something unexpected. Not suspicion. Not jealousy. Sympathy. Emily continued. Before she died, she made Damien promise something. My pulse quickened immediately. A promise. Suddenly the pieces started shifting into a different shape, not fitting together yet.
But moving.
What promise? I asked. Emily's voice trembled. That Lily would never feel abandoned. The words settled heavily between us. I stared at the rain beyond the window. Memories surfaced without warning. Damien disappearing on certain weekends. Quiet donations that never appeared on tax records. The sadness that sometimes crossed his face when he thought nobody was watching. Small mysteries I had ignored for years. Why keep this from me? I whispered. Emily sighed. Because he was afraid. I almost laughed. Damien Moretti was not afraid of anything. At least that was what everyone believed. Afraid of what? I asked. Losing you. The answer landed harder than I expected. My eyes drifted toward the empty driveway outside. Damien was still gone, still carrying this secret somewhere across the city. Emily continued carefully. The longer he waited, the harder it became. Every year he told himself he would explain everything. Every year he convinced himself it was not the right time. I pressed a hand against my forehead. 7 years. 7 years of marriage. 7 years of silence. There is something else, isn't there? I asked quietly. Emily did not answer immediately. The hesitation told me everything. My heartbeat returned. Fast. Uneven. Emily. When she finally spoke, her voice barely rose above a whisper. Claire, there is a reason Lily keeps asking about you. I stopped breathing. What reason? Another long pause. Then 3 words changed everything all over again. She has your letters. My letters. The words echoed through my mind so loudly that I almost missed what Emily said next. Claire. She asked gently. Are you still there? I swallowed hard. What do you mean she has my letters? My voice barely sounded like my own. Across the line, Emily hesitated. The letters you wrote Damien. I stared at the rain-streaked window above the sink. Nothing about that sentence made sense. How would she have my letters? Another pause. Then Emily answered quietly. Because he reads them to her. The room tilted. Not physically. Emotionally. Like the ground beneath every assumption I had made was shifting. What? I whispered. Emily exhaled slowly. When Lily's mother died, she became terrified of losing people. She stopped trusting promises. She stopped believing adults stayed. The knot in my chest tightened. Then Damien started visiting more often. I closed my eyes. Suddenly I could picture it. The school, the careful distance. The way Lily had smiled when she saw him, not like a daughter greeting a father, like a child greeting someone safe, someone reliable, someone who always came back. Emily continued. One day she asked him why he always returned. Her voice softened. He did not know how to explain it. I gripped the phone tighter. So he showed her something. The silence that followed felt enormous. What? I asked. One of your anniversary letters. My breath caught. Every year, on our anniversary, I wrote Damien a letter. Not because he asked for them. Because I wanted to. Sometimes they were funny. Sometimes serious. Sometimes they were just memories written on paper. Little pieces of our life together. He carried them with him. I whispered. Always. Emily's answer came immediately. Too naturally to be a lie. Tears stung my eyes before I realized they were there. Lily asked why someone would write those things, Emily said. So Damien read them to her. I lowered myself into a chair. The kitchen suddenly felt very quiet. At first it was only one letter, Emily continued. Then another. Then another. Her voice warmed slightly. Eventually they became her favorite stories. I stared at the floor. My emotions no longer knew what direction to move. Anger still existed. Confusion still existed. But now something else had entered the room. Something far more complicated. Why would he do that? I asked. Emily laughed softly. Because your letters taught her something he could not explain himself. My throat tightened. What? That people can stay. The words hit harder than any secret. Harder than any lie. Outside, the rain had begun to slow. The drops slid lazily down the glass. Emily remained silent for several seconds before speaking again. Claire, there is something you need to understand. I wiped my eyes quickly. What? Damien never hid Lily because he was ashamed of her. Then why? Her answer came immediately. Because he was terrified you would think exactly what you thought. I closed my eyes. The child. The school. Boston. Emily. Every clue I had collected now looked different. Not gone. Not explained completely. Different. He should have told me, I whispered. I know. Emily sounded genuinely sad. I told him that for years. Years. The word landed heavily. Years? I repeated. Yes. My heartbeat quickened again. There was still something missing. A piece of the puzzle nobody had shown me. Emily seemed to sense it. Claire, she said softly, the secret was never Lily. I opened my eyes. Then what was it? For a long moment, Emily said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. There was a promise. The rain outside had almost stopped completely. What promise? I asked. Another pause followed. Longer than any before. It is not my promise to explain. My pulse quickened. Emily. No. Her voice remained gentle but firm. Damien should be the one to tell you. I gripped the phone tighter. Then why call me at all? I asked. Emily exhaled slowly. Because he keeps waiting for the perfect moment. Silence settled between us. Then she added quietly, and sometimes waiting becomes another way of hiding. I stared into the darkness beyond the kitchen window. Is it something bad? I whispered. No. Her answer came immediately. But it is important. The knot in my chest tightened again. Important. Not bad. Somehow that felt even more frightening. Before I could ask another question, Emily spoke one final time. Claire, whatever happens next, remember one thing. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. What? Another pause. Then she said the words that stayed with me long after the call ended. The person Damien has been protecting all these years is not who you think. The line went silent. The front door opened just after 10 o'clock. I did not move from the kitchen table. The house was dark except for the small lamp above the stove. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Damien stepped inside and immediately froze when he saw me waiting. For a second, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavier than any argument we had ever had. He looked tired. Not physically tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying something for too long. Slowly, he set his keys on the counter. His gaze found mine. Emily called. I watched the truth reach him before he said a word. His shoulders lowered slightly, not in defeat, in relief. Almost as if he had spent years expecting this moment. I know, he said quietly. I stared at him. 7 years of marriage sat between us. 7 years of trust. 7 years of secrets. Then tell me. My voice barely rose above a whisper. Damien nodded once. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me. For several seconds, he simply stared at the table. Then he finally spoke. 8 years ago, I met a woman named Sarah Bennett. I listened without interrupting. She was dying. The words hung in the air between us. Emily worked with her. That is how we met. His voice remained steady, but I could hear the weight beneath it. Sarah had a daughter, Lily. My chest tightened. Damien continued. She was terrified. He looked down at his hands. Not for herself. For Lily. The kitchen seemed impossibly quiet. She knew she was running out of time. She knew her daughter would be left behind. He swallowed hard, and she asked me for a favor. My pulse quickened. Finally, the promise. The secret. The thing that had lived in the shadows of our marriage for years. Damien looked up. His eyes met mine. She asked me to make sure Lily never felt abandoned. I felt my throat tighten. That was the promise? Part of it. He nodded slowly. The other part involved you. My heart skipped. Me. Damien reached into his coat pocket and removed a worn envelope. The edges were faded from years of being carried. He placed it carefully on the table. Sarah wrote this before she died. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The paper felt fragile, precious. Damien continued before I opened it. Sarah met you once. I frowned. No, she did not. A sad smile touched his face. You just never knew it. Confusion crossed my face. Damien leaned back slightly. 3 months before she died, she attended a literacy fundraiser at your school. The memory surfaced instantly. Hundreds of people had attended. Parents, teachers, donors, volunteers. She watched you spend almost an hour helping a little girl learn to read. I stared at him. Sarah told Emily later that if anything happened to her, she hoped Lily would someday meet someone like you. The room blurred slightly through the tears gathering in my eyes. Damien continued. After she passed away, Lily struggled. His voice cracked. A lot. He looked away briefly. Nothing I did seemed to help. Silence filled the room. Then he smiled sadly. Until I showed her one of your letters. I lowered my eyes. Claire. She did not fall in love with the stories. His voice softened. She fell in love with the person who wrote them. The tears finally slipped free. Damien nodded toward the envelope still resting in my hands. Open it. Slowly, I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Dear Lily, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, but it also means Damien kept his promise. There is something I want you to know. Somewhere in this world is a woman named Claire. She does not know you yet. But if life is kind, one day she will. Trust her. She has the kind of heart that makes people feel safe. By the time I reached the end, I could no longer see the words clearly. Tears blurred everything. Across the table, Damien sat quietly, not hiding anymore, not running anymore, just telling the truth. Finally, why did you not tell me? I whispered. His answer came immediately. Honest. Unprotected. Because every year it became harder. He looked directly into my eyes. And because I was terrified that one day you would look at me exactly the way you are looking at me now. I shook my head, slowly. How am I looking at you? Damien smiled sadly. Like a man who should have trusted his wife sooner. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, for the first time in weeks, I reached across the table and took his hand. The secret was never another woman. It was never a hidden child. It was never betrayal. It was a promise. And sometimes the heaviest promises are the ones carried alone.